Hello and welcome to Economy and Markets TV, where we have conversations with a purpose. I'm your host, Dave Okenquist, the Senior Research Analyst here at Dent. Joining me to take you around the world of economic and financial news and covering each topic in 2 minutes or less is the editor of Boom and Bust, Mr. Rodney Johnson. Rodney, how are you?
I'm well, Dave. How are you?
I am great, Rodney. Always great to be talking to you and to sort of going over the major events of the week. One of the ones was, hey, there's some trouble with Trump again. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has directed a number of their committees to form an impeachment inquiry. Not quite really, it's a little muddy here what this actually means versus what they were doing before. But it's, of course, pivoting onto the news of this Ukrainian phone call situation. I don't know. I mean, we're not a political analyst show here. We don't do that sort of thing. But it's really, it reminds me of a question I got this week from John, who asked, okay, there's a lot of this stuff coming up again. What impact will this have on the markets? Or is this going to blow over? So, Rodney, let's maybe focus on that. Some of the markets so far didn't seem to really care about any of it. In fact, I thought they went up on the release of this transcript or summary of the call, whatever you want to call it. So, what are your thoughts here?
Well, I think it shows the opposite. I think it shows that it's very important to the markets. When it was announced, the market, the whistleblower thing a couple of days ago, the market dropped 370 points from, up 150, 200 down to 150 or so. And so the market's like, wait a second, if we get a real impeachment, which this is not, this was Nancy Pelosi directing existing committees that were already looking at Trump stuff to keep looking. She did not call for an impeachment vote on the floor of the House of Representatives. And so it's not moving toward a real impeachment yet, but the market didn't like it because if it happens, then we're mired in this thing for months and months, and it means that it's less likely that Trump would be reelected. And you can't lose sight of the fact that Trump getting elected drove the markets ridiculously higher because people saw tax cuts, they saw less regulation, they saw, all sorts of things that happened and drove the economy, right? And drove profits. And so if it looks like Trump's reelection is, it's in question right now, right? It's a contest. But if it's cemented, if we get a true impeachment vote and this looks like, hey, this guy's on the way out, then you're looking at the front runner on the Democratic side as the most likely winner. And none of that is positive for cash flow for business. I'm not saying it's not positive or negative for the nation. Gotcha. I'm saying that it would be a setback on the financial side, and the markets are very sensitive to that. So when the whistleblower complaint actually came out and people said, meh, you may not like it, but it doesn't look impeachable, people felt a lot better and the markets went back up.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does, just to that point, I mean, compared to the Russia thing, which just fell over, died, blew up, and became a blob on the floor, this certainly looks like absolutely nothing compared to that. But again, we don't know all the details. Just one thing there. Yeah, you said about the prospect of Biden or Warren. Mm-hmm. Now, we're probably going to have a Republican Senate, so there probably isn't going to be or it'll be less likely that some of this big sweeping legislation will be able to go through. So that's my question to you is, as I ding myself for going late here, but with that being said, President Trump has been able to dictate market action by tweet, not necessarily by legislation totally. I mean, we had the tax cuts and that sort of thing. So could we see that and potentially from a Warren administration, a Biden administration that is more aggressive in its messaging that could, maybe threatening the banks or that sort of thing, even if it's not formal legislation?
It goes well beyond that. It's not, we're in the woeful state of governing through executive order.
Yeah.
And so what we have are, the people that occupy the highest office dictating what they want it to be by executive order. And as long as their agencies are willing to go along with it, then things happen that direction. And so it doesn't have to be that a Warren or Biden presidency says this or that. It's that they direct their agencies to move that way in how they regulate businesses. And that can be an absolutely huge change that will definitely impede business. And so we don't need real legislation, which is, as I said, woeful. It should be legislation first, and then you regulate to the legislation. But that's not what we do. So I think it could be a major change.
So we could see these EPA regulations come back to Obama levels. We could see some of these other things just because, you can unroll them and roll them back up, right?
Right, and it's not it's not the ones you know, right? It's the ones you don't know. I mean, Warren has said very clearly she wants to require public companies to put a member of their workforce on their board. She wants to have a community responsibility person on each board. And so you've got to think through the changes that a different president is going to ask of businesses, and more or less demand, not ask, but demand, and do it through the CFPB, do it through, the Office of Thrift Supervision, do it through the SEC. Anybody that they can appoint that's going to lead an agency is going to dramatically change the face of what they do, and that's what businesses are looking at.
Yeah, that very not so subtle threatening language of could be subject to investigation if do not follow my executive order.
Right. And again, I'm not making a judgment call on whether this is right or wrong. I'm saying it's what the candidates are putting out there and what everybody is going to expect.
Absolutely. Rodney, last week we talked about the shortage of cash on hand for some banks where the Treasury had to step in. And we talked a little bit about that, scratching the surface. It's a very in the weeds topic and one that just doesn't come up a lot in terms of explanations and all that. And I got a couple of comments thanking us for going over it and actually thirsting for some more. And you actually provided some of that for everybody, didn't you?
Well, I made the monthly insight video that we do, kind of a deeper look into what's going on in our research. And I talked about this because it's an important topic. People need to know what it is. It stems out of what happened in 2008. The Fed started paying interest on excess reserves. And so banks can earn money on the money they haven't lent out by just leaving it sitting at the Fed. Now, there's an interesting kind of dance going on. The Fed has said, hey, if you're a systemically important financial institution, if you remember that term from 10 years ago, then we hold you to a higher level of regulation and scrutiny. And so the biggest banks, which are the ones that hold most of the reserves, are going, I don't really want to lend out all that because then my sci-fi designation might come in and I might get dinged on something at the quarter end. And so what we have are people that are kind of cleaning up their books for quarter end, making sure all their loan numbers look right. And we have the largest institutions that control most of the excess reserves going, wait a second, I want as much as that as possible on my books because I want to look as good as possible when I get this normal quarter end thing. So it's all coming together to a head. The Fed controls it. The Fed can create money anytime they want and kind of alleviate some of this. I think that's what they're going to do. Yeah. And so I think what we're seeing is the plumbing not working the way that the Fed wanted it to, and then going, maybe we should rethink this. And it's like, yeah, when you pump $4 trillion into economy, weird things are going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Rodney, this video was exclusive to Boom and Bust subscribers, and you do one of these every single month on sort of these deep dives into things that are going on in the world that you really can't. It takes a long time for someone to sort of sift through all the news articles on their own. And actually, I believe on this very topic, actually, I remember when this was going on, my knowledge of this wasn't so deep. And I remember I'm reading CNBC, Wall Street Journal. No one's telling, they're reporting on the action, but not telling me what this is. And I remember having to call you up on the phone. We're like, Rodney, what are they talking about here? Exactly. And you sort of walked me through it. And then you do this sort of thing each and every month for Boom and Bust subscribers. So if you want this kind of analysis, this deep dive that Rodney does every month, become a Boom and Bust subscriber. All right, let's move on to the other piece of news that came out. We had some housing news. We had the 20-city home price index that rose 2% year over year. Rodney, we've talked about this over the past couple of months, that if you look at the chart, that line on the chart is getting closer and closer to 0% growth. We also had new home sales. Those were up 7% in July, saw an upward revision to just under 5%. And as you noted in the copy today, that 3-month average of 703,000 is the highest since October 2007. It certainly seems like there's a lot of demand out there for housing.
There is, and we have to remember, I mean, new home sales of 700,000 is still half of what it was at the peak back in 2005, 2006. And so home builders are not building as many homes. That has not changed. Home price appreciation, as you noted, is slowly moving down toward that zero line. That hasn't changed in over a year now. Right. And so hopefully we see these things come together where we're building more homes as the price comes down so that the younger generation can afford them, because new home buyers are still off by 25%, and they're the ones that drive this market. Those of us that have had homes, I think I'm on my 8th or 9th one, right? And so I'm actually moving again. But it doesn't help overall home ownership because I'm just trading one for another. We
Right.
need the young set, the people who've never owned a home, to get into the game. And hopefully rising wages, more inventory, and lower interest rates will help that, along with prices not going up as fast or faster than wages, which has been the problem for a decade.
Absolutely. Now, we went long in the beginning here, so that's all I had on that. So we're trying to keep time. Ronnie, something else that happened this week, we had the Peloton IPO, the stationary bike and treadmill maker. Shares opened 7% below the $31.50 IPO. And as you mentioned, the IPO was initially valued at $8 billion. That doesn't seem to, that didn't hold up very well, did it?
Well, I think it actually finally priced at 29. And there was a bunch of, hemming and hawing, because what happens is they do the IPO and they distribute the shares to everybody who got allotted shares at the IPO price. And then it opens for secondary trading. It doesn't happen at the same time. It may be instantaneous, but it doesn't happen at the same time. So everybody gets their shares at $29, and then they watch the ticker to see what the first guy out in the secondary is going to pay for it. And the first guy didn't want to pay 29. And so all the dealers are going, wait a second, this is not going well.
Yeah.
And so they finally got a trade out the door at 27, which was a pukey number, down, almost 7%. And it finally, it ended the day at 25.76. It ended the day off 11%. And as I mentioned in the copy, I think here or somewhere else, the only person smiling about this is the CEO of Uber, because they had the same problem, but they only were down 6.9%. So at least they look better by comparison. But as I wrote in Economy and Markets last week, I would have stayed well away from this dumb thing. They don't earn a profit. Their losses actually quadrupled while their revenue doubled. That's not the relationship you want. They lose $870 on every person that's signed up. They would need to get their subscribers from 600,000 to a couple million for this to even, look anything like a sustainable business. And it's a gym membership. It's a cool gym membership, but how many people stick with them? That's the real problem. As they get bigger, how many people are just going to slough off like they normally do in every other gym membership? And this becomes, a really cool bike with a gym membership.
Yeah, and not an inexpensive bike. I believe the bike is got a little over $2,000. The treadmill's about $4,300, and you get this nice screen with somebody yelling in your face for an hour. I don't know. I mean, I don't exercise really, other than walking my dog a couple hours a day. So I'm not. You will not see me on a treadmill. Just as a consumer, seeing this sort of advertising, it seems very niche, sort of high end, hyper, like an executive who goes into this this mode where he's exercising. It doesn't seem to be for the masses. In other words, my point.
Well, it's not. I mean, I happen to have a stationary bike downstairs, and so it doesn't see a lot of use. But I did that for years, and changed to running and whatever. Even people that do exercise a lot, and I'm one of those people. Every morning I'm up, before 5 doing this.
Good for
but they
you.
rotate what they do, and so that's kind of the key. The people that are doing spin like crazy, a year or two, it would be unusual for them to stick with it, not because they stop exercising, but because they rotate and go on to something else.
Yeah.
And then that $40 a month membership, you're going to scratch your head and go, really? Do I need to pay $500 a year for this, when I can go find a spin class on YouTube anywhere? It won't be live, but I can go find one, gin it up, and do a 30, 45-minute class and move on without that fee.
Yeah, but one more thing on this. One thing that could be an area of growth is, because I think you're right, and they're trying to make it a bit immersive with that screen. But I saw a video from China where they were all on stationary bikes wearing VR headsets, and that seems like maybe that's the future, where you literally get taken to, I don't know, you're running the Pacific Coast Highway or something like that.
I will tell you that's spoken like a person who's never done spin. Because you sweat like crazy if you're doing it right. And the last thing you want is the headset or anything else touching you. So I don't know that particular thing is going to work out. Maybe we just get much bigger screens that surround you in your office or your spin studio at your house.
Yes, when the Star Trek holodeck becomes a reality, then
that's the thing.
Now we're really cooking. But I guess by then there won't be IPOs, right? Because we won't need them.
I don't know.
I don't know either. It doesn't matter. The other team to get into Star Trek. Well, that's all we had for this week, Rodney. I want to thank you. Oh, we have one more thing next week. Yeah, that we're going to have the big thing. Really, it's going to be a quiet week, but we're going to have the U.S. Jobs report Friday morning, so we'll be covering that. Thank you all for your questions and comments. If you want to send those, if you have those, send those to tv@economyandmarkets.com. For Rodney Johnson, I'm Dave Okenquist, and this has been Economy and Markets TV.